Anthony Armstrong-Jones cheated on Princess Margaret many times, but it took until 2004 for a DNA test to prove the depth of his depravities. Not only did he have an illegitimate daughter who'd been born during his honeymoon, but her mother's identity was the biggest shock of all. He may not have been born into the nobility, but no one could say that Anthony Armstrong-Jones's family was anything less than upper class. While his father's career as a barrister was prestigious, his mother's second marriage took them up to the next level. Her new husband was Lawrence Parsons, aka the 6th Earl of Ross. Anthony was now part of a noble family, and that meant a lot in 1930s England. He was shipped off to a series of boarding schools, including Eton, where he took up photography, boxing and rowing, though he still had to contend with a limp from an earlier battle with polio. He next made his way to Cambridge University to study architecture. For a while it seemed like he'd found his niche, until he failed his second-year exams. It seemed like a simple bump in the road, but it actually wound up changing the entire course of his life. Though other members of his family encouraged him, his normally cold parents grew even more disapproving when he suggested that he become a career photographer. Thanks to his upbringing, his noble stepfamily and his years at England's most prestigious schools, Anthony had friends in high places. Throughout the 50s, he made his name taking fashion photos and portraits of stage stars, and he also started to live it up. It was no secret that after taking photos of gorgeous young women in his studio on Pimlico Road, he'd invite them to stay for the raucous parties he held there, but even more scandalous rumours soon began to spread about him. He had plenty of gay friends, and stories about his male affairs followed him for years afterward. After conquering the worlds of fashion, theatre and studio photography, Anthony came up with his next move. He wanted to take royal portraits. He was in the right place at the right time, and Queen Elizabeth II tapped him to take a number of photos of her family. Though his relaxed style was controversial, the Queen was thrilled with his work. But tight-lipped about his romantic pursuits. The only relationship that he allowed the gossip writers to speculate on was his long on and off situation with showgirl Jacqueline Chan. But by the late 50s, he was simply using her to cover up a much more scandalous romance. What had begun as a friendship with Princess Margaret, the Queen's sister, was blossoming into something more. While they'd appear together in groups in public, the princess took great delight in disguising herself and sneaking away to see Anthony, who'd ask her opinions on his ongoing work. Though the royal family was determined to navigate this relationship differently than Princess Margaret's previous one to Peter Townsend, which ended under intense media scrutiny, in 1960 a press release announced the engagement of Princess Margaret and Anthony Armstrong-Jones. Everyone involved was thrilled, with one The couple married on May 6, 1960 in a lavish ceremony. It was a historic first. No royal wedding had ever appeared on TV before, and 20 million people tuned in. For their honeymoon, Anthony and Margaret embarked on a 6-week trip to the Caribbean. They missed a number of events, including the birth of Anthony's friend Jeremy Fry's child, an event that would later come back to haunt Anthony. But for the most he dealt with snobbery from all angles, even at home, where some servants would treat him rudely since he wasn't equal to the other royals. Unfortunately for Anthony, there were also a number of minor clashes with the royal family. Prince Philip had always been cold to him, but after the marriage, this became a pronounced distaste. Whereas Anthony was artistic and sensitive, Philip was a rugged outdoorsman. While Anthony found his way into a circle that included many bigwigs at Vogue, Margaret made friends with celebrities like the Beatles and Peter Sellers. In 1964, Princess Margaret gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Sarah. They were just 4 years into their marriage, and on the surface they looked like the perfect family. But by 1965, the distance and the pressure of life as a royal had had a fling with her daughter's godfather, a man named Anthony Barton. She also began to spend more and more time with the actor Peter Sellers. There were rumours about dalliances with former Prime Minister. The affair may have been brief, but it had disturbing repercussions. 18 months after it ended, Douglas Home took his own life at just 36 years old. But it weighed much heavier on Margaret than it did her husband. She acted out by drinking and acting rudely in public. As a result, anti-monarchists began to criticise her and the costs of her upkeep. But it would take a few more years of drama before the consequences finally caught the Caribbean. While Anthony had never gone back, Margaret had used it as a refuge during the rockiest parts of their marriage. And it was there that she took Roddy Llewellyn, the slacker son of a famous British equestrian. They were friends for a couple of years and met when he was 25 to her 43. It seemed like just another affair in a long string of indiscretions, but this would be the one that blew everything up. Notorious press magnate Rupert Murdoch had sent a New Zealand journalist to Mustique who pretended to vacation with his wife. While there, the writer caught a photo of Margaret and Roddy together. The publication of those photos family to procrastinate moving on the subject, but Anthony had a trick up his sleeve. He announced the separation himself without the consent or knowledge of Margaret or the royal family. The couple divorced in 1978, and Anthony wasted no time moving on. His relationship with Lucy Lindsay Hogg had crossed over from professional to romantic long before this, but it still came as a surprise to Margaret when Anthony announced that he'd be marrying Lucy just 5 months after their divorce. They tied the knot in December of 1978, but it wasn't exactly happily ever after. Though Anthony had lost the bitterness that had characterised the last 10 years of his marriage to Princess Margaret, he hadn't kicked all of his old bad habits. Somewhere between his separation and divorce, he'd begun an affair with married journalist Anne Hills. She was shocked when she read that he'd tied the knot with Lucy, but not quite willing to give him up over it. Because his marriage was ostensibly going well, he kept his affair with Anne Hills a secret instead of using it to hurt his wife the way he had with Margaret. The affair went on for a whopping 20 years. Anne had always wanted more from Anthony, but with the Guardian for many years, she was let go in late 1996. Another boyfriend had just left her and she'd spent yet another Christmas without Anthony. Deeply depressed, Anne Hills took her own life. She left a note telling Anthony that she'd always loved him and asking for a family heirloom he'd given her to be returned to him. When the authorities investigated, they collected her diaries, containing all the details of her 2 decades with Anthony. Before long, newspapers splashed the contents of those diaries across their pages, and that was how Anthony's wife Lucy learned that he'd been cheating on her for the entire duration of their marriage. 2 years after the press had blown up Anthony's long-term affair with Anne Hills, Lucy uncovered another bombshell. He'd fathered a child with a magazine editor named Melanie Cable Alexander, who was nearly 30 years younger than him. Ultimately, he parted ways with Melanie, and Lucy filed for divorce. Once again, Anthony's libido drove him to move on quickly and plentifully. Remarkably, Anthony and Lucy remained friends after their divorce, and she took care of him in his final years. And it was actually in those final years that many of his most scandalous secrets finally came out. Tony's indiscretions were not limited to women. People speculated that he was gay, and according to one biographer, he later admitted to being bi. Some men have claimed that they had romances with him, but this remains unproven. While both Anthony and his wife hit each other below the belt, he clearly instigated the whole thing. In 2004, DNA testing proving his honeymoon with Margaret. Polly, whose mother was Camilla Fry, grew up thinking her father was Jeremy Fry, a member of the family behind Fry's Chocolate. Jeremy had been best friends with Anthony and had nearly been the best man at his wedding to Princess Margaret, meaning that not only had Anthony cheated, he'd done it with his best friend's wife. Though both Jeremy Fry and Anthony initially denied the story, Anthony later admitted it was true after Fry's death. Thanks for watching History Exposé. If you love uncovering the best stories in history, hit like and subscribe to keep exploring with us. Don't forget to visit our main page, Factinate, for more incredible facts about everything.